It's Mental Health Awareness Week here at SGTV, and we're joined in the studio once again by Lucas from Andy's Man Club, and today's subject is finding your calm, as in how you can actually cope and not struggle with anxiety and panic attacks and that kind of thing. And we should mention also, we're obviously not mental health professionals, so this is just, as you say, shared experience, things we find that might help us, and we hope maybe you could find some use of this kind of subject.
Definitely.
So finding your calm then, Lucas. I mean, straight off the bat, I'll admit it sounds a bit airy-fairy, doesn't it? It does. But these are the stigmas we want to try and break down, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And like you've said, like I've said, we've both suffered with anxiety throughout the years. Both consider ourselves to be fairly outgoing people, confident people, but not afraid to say, these things do get the better of us. Yeah. So what would you say? How do you cope if you're, even to this day, do you still find anxiety, panic attacks can get to you?
So panic attacks, luckily I haven't had one for well over 4 years. Anxiety, the last real battle that I had with anxiety came to do with driving. I know it sounds weird, but I had nothing that triggered it whatsoever, but one day I got in the car, probably a few years after I passed my test, got on the motorway, and I started feeling as though I was going to have a panic attack. I started feeling those sort of feelings of dread, those feelings of catastrophe, thinking that, if I make a wrong move here, I'm going to crash and everything's going to go wrong, I'm going to die or whatever, just going catastrophe straight away. And that was the last real big battle I had with anxiety. And what I actually did to deal with that was I just faced my fear. I sort of had 2 years where if I were driving about the country, I'd go on just air roads, I'd avoid motorways, I'd do all sorts, do anything to avoid this thing. And then eventually, I was forced into a situation where I had to drive up to Dunfermline. I had to drive for 4 hours on the motorway. Did it with no trouble whatsoever, and that sort of pushed to one side. Now, I'm not obviously saying that everybody can face the fear, but that was something that I faced, and I just sort of, when I was forced into that corner and backed into a corner, I was able to just deal with it. I think, generally speaking, dealing with feelings of anxiety and feelings of stress are two similar things. Obviously, everybody gets stressed, and for me, I look, obviously, a buzzword is mindfulness, isn't it? And everybody thinks, when they think mindfulness, they think yoga, they think meditation, they think, going off in a teepee and doing some throat singing or whatever, right? That's what people think, but mindfulness ultimately is about finding that sense of calm. And there's so many different ways you can do it. For me, the biggest way I find calm is either hiking or jumping in a sauna. Or cold water therapy, and those are things that I absolutely love. And it's all about finding your own sort of inner peace of mind, and that's what it is in a nutshell. It does sound airy-fairy. I still, my toes curl a little bit when I hear mindfulness, but ultimately that's all it is. I think if you pull away, some of the meditation, all that type of thing, then ultimately there are loads of ways people can find their own mindfulness.
And it's not going to work. What might work for you is not necessarily going to work for everyone, and it could be anything. But as you said, going back a little bit, identifying what is actually, and I hate the word trigger as well, but it is right. Identifying what sort of triggers you, and knowing how you can sort of, whether you face that, whether you avoid it, whether you just take a step back and find your calm. And that could be anything, couldn't it? Like you say, hiking, going in the sauna, listening to music. Yeah. What sort of things do you find people are saying in the group sessions that are helping them?
I think it's a similar thing. I think there is a common theme of when people are able to get out into nature. That's a really positive thing. But overwhelmingly, I think it's a need for socialising, a need to be social people and to be social creatures. I think especially around lockdown and just after lockdown had happened, you had a rush of people coming to our groups who were suffering from loneliness, from social isolation, and that were people of every age, you know, people who just moved to new areas, people who were elderly, who were suffering with that, you know, lack of social interaction. And I think that's what a lot of people crave, and I think that a lot of people find comfort in that, finding people who've got shared interests with them and also having a bit of company. And we know not everybody can do that. We know that, you know, I mean, in this industry, you've got people who are lone workers, for example, who are working, you know, long days, and might not even see another person. They might see whoever they're doing the job for, but they're working these long days. And sometimes that social interaction, it can come like in the form of listening to a podcast, you know, having a laugh and joke, and that's what a lot of people are looking for. And I think finding, you know, ways to socialise with people and better engage with people is a really positive thing.
I want to touch on panic attacks, actually. Because we said in the previous episode, we've probably, in our younger days, probably laughed at the thought of a panic attack until it's come knocking at our doors, when it absolutely floors you and can still catch you. Even when you think you're at your best, it can catch you, but it's learning how to deal with it. So how would you describe a panic attack? And that might seem a silly question, but there probably are people out there that don't understand it. They don't know what it is until it happens to them. So how could they identify it if it was coming?
It's weird. It's so I know they affect people differently, but the way it used to affect me is my heart would start pounding. My heart would just race. I'd start sort of focusing on the fact that my heart were beating quite heavily. Start to probably sweat a little bit and tremble. And then my breathing would go really, really shallow. And, you know, what I learned eventually was that when the heartbeat started, you know, obviously when the heart started beating fast, if I tried to focus on that, instead of thinking, you know, oh, what's happening, which is what I thought quite often, if I actually think, right, I'm having a panic attack, breathe, slow your breathing down, have a think, you know, that were a way I were able to stop it. You know, not always, but a lot of the time just focusing on each individual thing instead of thinking, you know, panicking because your heart's going so fast and racing and everything. But they affect people differently. I know one way that it used to manifest itself for me, where I had trouble swallowing, which is really weird. Yeah, so, you know, say like obviously you just like got fluid in your mouth and you swallow like during the day randomly, like I couldn't do it. I couldn't physically force myself to do it. And when that happened a few times, I'd be thinking, oh, maybe I'm on the cusp of having a panic attack, which is bizarre. But people have all sorts of different triggers. And I think what people don't realise is that the mind and the body are so interlinked, and that, you know, it's such a powerful thing. The fact that your mind can take over and it can confuse your body and cause it to do these, you know, these strange things. But that was sort of how I dealt with it, just really focus on each individual thing and try to just, you know, calm myself down, breathe deep. And also, if I were around people, tell people. For the first 2-3 years of me having these panic attacks, my biggest mistake was never telling anybody about it. But if you tell somebody, I think I'm having a panic attack, then the natural human response is sympathy. You'd be surprised, I think, even if you're with, you know, like we say, these burly tough guys or whatever, you know, if you say to somebody, I think I'm having a panic attack, then 9 out of 10 people will support you through it.
I'd agree. I definitely agree. I don't think we're constantly talking about breaking these stigmas, and I don't think it's anything to be ashamed about, and especially sharing that experience. But I think for me as well, identifying what caused it, and that's a big field that's different for everyone. Yeah. But I think at least attempting to figure out what's caused it, and in my opinion, there's no big or lesser insignificant reason for it. It can be something as huge as trauma, something really bad that people have gone through, and it can be something really simple. It can be, you know, especially in my opinion, it can be something just a lot of chores that are just getting to you, and before you know it, you're feeling overwhelmed, and it can have that panic attack. And if you stop and sort of peel it back and think, right, what's causing this? What can I do? It does help, as I say again, in my opinion, to help identify those kind of things.
I still haven't got a clue what caused mine at all. Like, you know, and that's the thing. It's something that I'll have to work out. They've stopped. You know, they could come back at some point, but not a clue, which leads me to think it's probably trauma, but I couldn't confidently say. But I think a lot of things, though, they can trigger it. So one thing that used to trigger them for me, was if I had a lot of caffeine. So if I had that sort of like underlying feeling of anxiety, general anxiety, and then I had quite a bit of caffeine, then quite often I'd have a panic attack. But like I say, the actual root cause of what it was for me, no idea. And that's why I'm utilising therapy to try and work out what actually caused these events to happen. Yeah,
and it's good of you to admit that on camera, that you're doing that, and that's why I appreciate you coming here so much.
All good. Yeah.
On that note, there is one thing, a weird thing that helped me in the midst of a real bad panic attack quite recently. I was just on the phone trying to how do I stop this panicking? Because it compounds, doesn't it? You get worse and worse. And they were saying find something of texture. And I literally had my cat next to me, and I just started stroking my cat. And funnily enough, it does help. Just something to take your mind off it. And it may sound daft. If you're laughing at this, fine. I don't care. It helped me. It got me out of a tricky situation. Yeah. But like we say, the simplest of things might be something that's going to help you.
Yeah.
So,
definitely.
But the message is talk about it. Come to Andy's Man Club. Open up.
And get a cat.
Get a cat.
Cats are great.
She's a but
nice.
Yeah, but thank you for coming on the show and talking about this. And we're going to be doing more episodes of this kind of thing. So please make sure you keep an eye out for those. And as always, like, subscribe, hit the notification button below. Go to Andy's Man Club, and we'll see you in the next one.